The message that follows is not for the weak. They told you that you're different, that you were born for something greater, that deep inside you were destined to change the world. But here's the truth. No one wants to say out loud, you're not special, not in the way you've been led to believe. And that is your greatest advantage. Because the moment you stop living under the crushing weight of greatness, the moment you stop chasing some invisible crown of uniqueness, you begin to live. You start focusing on reality, on effort, on presence. You begin to find peace in being enough. This video is not here to sugarcoat your ego. It's here to break the illusion. And once it's shattered, you'll be free to rebuild yourself, for real. From childhood, we're told we're unique snowflakes. Teachers, parents, media, they all repeat the same mantra. You're special. But as we grow, the world starts whispering something very different. You apply for that dream job. Rejected. You post online. No one cares. You try to stand out, only to feel invisible. And in that moment, a quiet panic creeps in. What if I'm just average? This fear is more common than you think. In fact, a 2023 study from the American Psychological Association revealed that nearly 72% of Gen Z individuals experience imposter syndrome on a recurring basis. Not because they're incapable, but because they were conditioned to believe they should always be exceptional. The result? A generation paralyzed by the pressure of being something they're not, constantly comparing, constantly chasing, and constantly feeling like failures. The illusion of being special is comforting until it becomes a prison. When you believe you're inherently exceptional, every failure feels like a personal betrayal. You weren't just rejected, you were exposed. Not getting what you want isn't just disappointment. It becomes proof that the story you were told about yourself was a lie. This belief fuels anxiety and resentment. Because when life doesn't hand you the spotlight, you start blaming others, systems, or luck. But here's the brutal reality. The world doesn't owe you recognition. It doesn't care about your potential, your feelings, or your intentions. It only responds to results, to action, to value delivered. And ironically, the obsession with being special leads to mediocrity. Why? Because those who truly grow aren't fixated on proving their worth. They're focused on improving it. They show up. They fail. They learn. They get better. Not because they think they're better than others, but because they know they're not. You don't need to be special to be successful. You need to be consistent. You need to be sharp. You need to execute. That's what builds competence, confidence, and respect. Not entitlement, not self-delusion, not empty affirmations. Because in the end, those who let go of the need to be special are the ones who actually rise above the rest. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." At the core of this idea lies a rejection of inherited meaning. Nietzsche believed that the pursuit of external validation, fame, admiration, or being special was the path of the last man, a shallow creature who craves comfort over growth. He urged us to move beyond the illusion of being unique and instead embrace the will to power, the inner drive to shape our lives through action and responsibility. Psychology echoes this sentiment. According to self-determination theory, Dicey and Ryan, 1985, what truly drives human motivation isn't external praise, but three innate needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. In other words, it's not about being better than others. It's about feeling capable, connected, and in control of your own life. The more you chase external specialness, the more you starve your internal needs. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist philosopher, claimed that existence precedes essence. You are not born with a purpose. You create it. Waiting for the world to validate your uniqueness is to live in what he called bad faith, denying your own freedom by hoping someone else defines you. You are not special. And that truth, it liberates you to act rather than wait. Modern psychology reinforces this through the concept of the growth mindset, Dweck, 2006. Believing you're special often locks people into a fixed mindset. They feel threatened by failure, avoid challenges, and crumble under criticism. But those who see themselves as works in progress are more resilient, adaptable, and successful. They improve not because they think they're destined, but because they decide. The fusion of these philosophies and scientific findings tells us one thing. The fantasy of being extraordinary is not what empowers you. Facing your ordinariness is. In that emptiness, in that void of imagined importance, you are finally free to build something real. So what happens when you stop trying to be special? When you finally let go of that exhausting need to stand out, to be seen, to matter more than the person next to you? Most people never find out. They're too afraid to dissolve the mask, because they think there's nothing underneath. But what if that's exactly where real power hides? Imagine if your obsession with being different is the very thing making you just like everyone else. What if the pursuit of uniqueness is the new conformity, traded in likes, filters, curated bios, and desperate performances for virtual applause? The irony is brutal. The more you try to stand out, the more invisible you become. And only those brave enough to fade truly leave a mark. There's something terrifying about being average. We think if we don't shine, we'll be forgotten. But here's the twist. Forgetting who you think you're supposed to be might be the only way to remember who you actually are. It's not the spotlight that reveals you. It's the silence. It's not performance. It's presence. And here's a question. If no one were watching, if there were no followers, no applause, no external reward, would you still do what you do? Would you still speak the way you speak? Would you still pursue the same goals? If the answer is no, then maybe you were never the author of your story. But if the answer is yes, if you could exist without needing to impress, without needing to be special, then you've just unlocked a kind of strength most people never even glimpse. Because when you stop begging to be seen, people start noticing you, and they don't even know why. The desire to be special is rooted in one of the brain's oldest survival mechanisms, the need for belonging and recognition. Studies in social neuroscience reveal that exclusion or perceived insignificance activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. That's why being ignored, or feeling average, hurts. Your mind interprets it as a threat. But here's the twist. Constantly seeking to be special keeps your brain locked in a cycle of anxiety and identity instability. When your self-worth is built on uniqueness, you become addicted to validation. Dopamine spikes every time you get noticed, but it crashes when you're overlooked. This is the psychological trap. You're not addicted to attention itself. You're addicted to the relief it brings from feeling invisible. The result? You shape your personality around applause, not authenticity. Over time, you lose touch with what actually fulfills you. This obsession also distorts your perception of others. When you think you're special, you often see people as competition instead of connection. Empathy drops, narcissism rises, and comparison becomes your default state. You begin to chase significance instead of meaning. But significance fades. Meaning lasts. Psychologists have noted a rise in specialness anxiety among younger generations, especially in social media environments. It's the panic that you're not doing enough, not standing out enough, not becoming the person you promised the world you'd be. But the solution isn't more visibility, it's internal clarity. The most grounded people aren't chasing attention. They're rooted in purpose. Freedom comes when you realize you don't need to be extraordinary to live an extraordinary life. That's not a paradox. That's liberation. When you finally give up the exhausting performance, your mind quiets. Your relationships deepen. Your energy returns. You don't need to be special. You need to be real. So here's the truth. You're not special. And that's your greatest advantage. Because when you stop wasting energy trying to stand out, you start focusing on what actually matters. Growth, peace, purpose. You stop performing for the crowd and start living for yourself. And ironically, that's when life starts to shift. When you no longer need to be seen, people start noticing. When you no longer beg for recognition, you gain respect. The power you were chasing by trying to be exceptional, it finds you when you become grounded, humble, and consistent. So, what if this is your turning point? What if today is the day you drop the act, silence the noise, and start being the person you were meant to be, not the person you hoped others would admire? The moment you stop trying to be special is the moment you become powerful.